All right, everybody. So this one is another vase that I am carving out of a scrap piece of Russian olive. We have a lot of Russian olive here in Western Colorado. Not native, of course. They were introduced, I don't know when, but were super popular in the 80s, maybe even the 70s here, before my time being here. They were encouraged by the extensions and Forest Service as, quickly propagating and super resilient trees and whatever, only later to be considered invasive and a hazard and various other things. So we have a bunch of them. When I owned my tree service company, a bunch of these were removed. It's a beautiful wood, honestly. It is a hardwood. It's not a hard wood. It's not very dense. It's fairly soft, so it dents and things, but it is really pretty, and it has unique growth structure to the vein and the grain of the wood. So cutting it with the bandsaw actually is a challenge in certain directions, more so than some other woods. And you can see that I'm freehanding this on the bandsaw. Once again, never recommend that you follow my methods because they are kind of sketchy at times, but I work best for my designs when I'm just freehand and letting creativity flow based on the shapes that I see, whatnot. The dark heartwood with the cream colored sapwood makes that a really pretty wood. And so I cut it out to kind of square it up because I don't like my stuff personally to look super rustic. I'm more into modern design and brutalist work, so a lot of mid-century influence and things. So I did get most of that rough cut kind of stuff out of it, and now I'm going back and hitting all those angles that I created with the belt sander here, and trying to get some of those curves I put into it refined. Once again, this is all just rough form. I haven't finished this sculpture as of this video being released. I will finish it and show you guys once that's done, but I'm just going about, flattening and smoothing these areas. Once again, when I use the belt sander, I'm not always trying to get things flat. It's hard to see in some of the videos, but there's like a subtle pressure that gets put in certain areas to make, sometimes the difference of degree is only half a degree or 1 degree from one angle to the next. So it's a subtlety, but using a belt sander helps just smooth those, blade marks out of there from the bandsaw. And this is 80 grit once again on my belt sander, and I also use the belt sander as a forming tool. These sculptures are a bit light, they're small, so it's easier to move the sculpture, the vase, around and hit areas than it is to clamp it down and use a sander of some sort to form it, in my opinion. And this is much faster, so there's always more than one way to do something, but for this particular style and the size of wood that I'm working with, using the belt sander and moving the sculpture around to create and form the sculpture, or vase in this case, which is still a sculpture, is easier in my opinion. So that's why I use the belt sander quite a bit. And so we're just trying to get rid of, there was some areas where the bark had come off and the dried cambium was still left, or that cork cambium layer. So I was getting all that off. Now, after I made it pretty angular, I had experimented with another vase. You can't really see it in this image, but it's laying on the table behind the two vases at the base of the belt sander. I had played with rounding off the corners so that it was more smooth and round than it was. It was much softer in a radius than it was hard edged. And that's why, it showed me in the one video clip sanding the Russian olive vase there really flat and trying to get it kind of angular, and now I'm back at it again later in the day, clearly by the tone of light, rounding off most of those corners, to be honest with you, is what I'm doing now. Which, just going through the motions, and when possible, I try to go sand with the grain, but that doesn't always work. Sometimes to hit it just right, you need to go across the grain, which makes it harder to hold on to. Also makes it harder to get those sanding marks out when you're doing the final finish sand with the orbital sander. This is, once again, it is a hardwood by species type, but it's a softwood in the sense of working it. So it cuts pretty easily and it sands pretty easily. But that also means that it leaves marks pretty easily, and those can be a challenge at times to get out when they're near like a knot or if they're cross grain or whatnot. So I try to avoid that where possible. Now, here very soon, I'm going to lose this thing out of my hand. It goes flying across the yard, and it's because there's just a lot of friction, and the more I sand this thing, the smoother it gets, and it gets slick in the hand. There it went. And I just put too much pressure in the wrong place, and it grabbed it. I'm showing you where it hit the gravel over there, which didn't do much damage, so I'm just going back and sanding that a little bit to get that little area where it got hit out of there. And I'm continuing to round around, the hollow in the vase. This is a dry stem vase, once again. I won't hit my knuckles on the belt sander there. That's a common occurrence when I'm doing this kind of work. Having bloody knuckles when I'm doing this stuff is pretty common. And that was actually the second time that day I'd done it, so it had already stopped bleeding, but then it started again after this. You'll see me like wiping my knuckle on my pant legs a few times or whatnot. I think I'm slightly allergic to Russian olive, so that means that when I get sawdust and stuff on me, it's not like a major allergy, but it can affect me, and I don't always react the best or respond the best to Russian olive sawdust in my hands.